and then that'll alert everyone else, I think,
set
when they
up.
join. So thanks everyone for joining us.
And then turn it back on again.
And welcome to this event. Great, thanks. So if you wouldn't mind popping yourselves on mute as you'll have, that would be great, thank you. So welcome everyone. I'm Julie, I'm Collections Curator at the New Art Gallery Walsall. And for audio description purposes, I am a blonde Scottish woman in my early 40s, and I'm wearing a Pride rainbow t-shirt. So thank you for joining us for this lovely, on this lovely evening. It's nice and sunny outside where I'm in Birmingham anyway. So this is the Zoom event Art, Motherhood and Lockdown, and it's part of the events programme for the 2020 collection, of which one of the artists is a latecomer. Hi, Michelle. Just like you. So this is part of this events programme for this exhibition, which is currently on at the New Art Gallery in our ground floor community gallery space, and it's on until Sunday the 28th of August. So I hope you can all get the chance to check it out if you haven't already seen it. So I can't believe it opened in January. This year is going so quickly. Time does seem to have speeded up since lockdown and since COVID-19 graced us with its presence. But yes, it's just got a couple of months left now. So as for many, the last 2 years have felt like a bit of a blur for me. I myself had a new baby just as lockdown hit, and COVID started, and I spent most of my maternity leave in lockdown, so it was a bit of a weird experience for me, as I'm sure it was for lots of us. So 2020 was in fact the gallery's 20th anniversary year, and as with all museums and galleries, we were closed for most of it. So there were some savings made from us being closed, so we decided to put these savings to good use and to try to support West Midlands artists at this difficult time. So we did this call out to acquire works which were produced during lockdown and which reflected the events of that very strange year. And this also then commemorated our 20th birthday year. So we were surprised and delighted that we were inundated with responses, and then we managed to acquire 32 new artworks by 30 West Midlands artists for our permanent collection. These were in a range of media, from photography, painting and sculpture, and on a range of themes like COVID-19, Black Lives Matter and Brexit. So it was quite the year 2020 with all these strange events. So the only specification was that the work had to be of a domestic size, so roughly about 60 by 60 centimetres, in keeping with the kind of homely feel of our collection spaces, which were built around the personal collection of donor Kathleen Garman. And also this was in keeping with the fact that artists were having to work smaller in a lot of cases, working from home. So clearly the majority of works were produced in the context of lockdown. So artists couldn't go to their studios or out to work outside of home. So they had to adapt to working from home. And in the case of many of the women artists, also had caring responsibilities. This was such a prevalent theme in the collection that we then thought it was apt to make this event a focus for the experiences of artist mothers during lockdown, and to look at both the positive and challenging aspects of this time for their practice. When the first lockdown hit, we also had to adapt our artist studio programme to enable remote residencies. And one of these residencies was undertaken by Faye Claridge, who will be leading the discussion this evening. For her stay-at-home residency, Faye collaborated with other artists' parents who were homeschooling as she was, and asked them to get their child or children to respond to one of their artworks. And the fantastic responses she received have been compiled in an artist's book, which has also been acquired for the gallery's collection. So first of all, let me introduce you to this evening's panel, and perhaps you can each identify yourselves and give a wee wave as I just introduce you. So Faye, as I mentioned, is a socially engaged artist based in Warwickshire who explores representation and belonging in their practice. Faye is, like me, a mum of 2 boys. And the artist's book, I See You Anew, documents her stay-at-home residency undertaken with the gallery in 2020, where she encouraged artist parents to develop new works with their children who they were homeschooling, bringing new perspectives to family relationships at this time of global lockdown. For many of the children, it was the first time that they had been ever asked to consider what it was that their parents did all day. And for the artist, the first time having to navigate professionalism and parenting together in a time of crisis. Faye's book reverted alphabetical order in listing the artists, so we're going to do the same this evening. So then next up, we will have Yasmin Agilah-Hood. Hey, Yasmin. Yasmin is an illustrated designer, maker, and a mother of 2 based in Worcester. And they are also now part of the artist educator team at the New Art Gallery. They were commissioned by the now sadly disbanded Worcester Arts Workshop during lockdown to make a Black Lives Matter response to the murder of George Floyd. Yasmin used this opportunity to try to develop a creative flow to process her anger and grief and ultimately to try to find peace with the situation. And the resulting mixed media painting, Pardon the Miss, has been acquired by the gallery as part of the 2020 collection. Next up is Sinead. Where's Sinead? Hi. Sinead is a Coventry-based photographer and she joins us extraordinarily in the last few days before maternity leave for her 2nd child. So her work, Day 52, is the title image for this event and features a scene that straight away spoke to me, living in a terrace house with little children during the first lockdown. Lovely weather, the garden was the sanctuary where we spent so much of our time, and her painterly image captured that experience in a nutshell. The beauty, the family time, but also the sense of confinement and loneliness and repetition of this Groundhog Day. Next, we will have Sally Butcher. Hi, Sally, who is a Birmingham-based artist lecturer and soon-to-be PhD researcher, having recently received funding for a cross-curricular AHRC practice-based PhD based at Birmingham School of Art. Sally's current practice explores themes around fertility and motherhood. Sally gave birth to her 2nd child just 3 days before the initial national lockdown, and she created the triptych, Lockdown Here, Who Cares?, as a reflection of the increased caring responsibilities a lot of women face during this time, using phone photographs which captured her growing family's changing hairstyles during lockdown, hair being the metaphor for caring rituals, showing the mundanity of the everyday new normal when taking care never meant so much. And last but not least, we will have Adele Mary Reed. Hi, Adele. He is an artist and facilitator of the Coventry Mothers Who Make group, which is part of a global initiative of support hubs for mother makers. During lockdown, Adele documented her solo bike rides taken around Coventry during the allotted daily exercise on a Fuji Instax camera. These were short breaks in caring for her young daughter, who she co-parents, though on one bike ride, her daughter accompanied her. The resulting 32 photographs and meditative collage film, Instant Dreamscapes in Isolation, have entered the 2020 collection. And I just love the background of your little girl shouting, "He's picking the daisies, he's picking the daisies" on the film soundtrack, because it always makes me smile when I hear it in the exhibition space. So I think we've decided that we're all going to share our own screens. And I think I might have slides if needed, so I can jump into support, but I'm not the best with tech, so just bear with. So for the audience, please feel free to put any questions that you may have or anything that comes to mind into the chat box, which I'll try and monitor. And if it's artist specific, perhaps then we can ask them at the time or after each artist speaks and shows their slides. But if it's general, maybe we can just put the questions to all of the artists at the end, and then we can all have a bit of an informal chat. So we've allowed slightly more time this evening just to allow it to be a bit more relaxed, and you're therefore welcome to drop in and out as you like to fit in with your evening and your schedule. I'm fully expecting, I can hear them now, some kids bombing at some point. I have asked my partner to try and keep them entertained for at least an hour, but who knows. So we completely understand if yours do the same, don't worry, but it'd be great if you just pop yourselves on mute so there's no background noise and everyone can hear the speakers effectively. And then at the end, you're more than welcome as well to pop on your cameras and things, and then we can all have a bit of a chat before we finish. So I will shut up now and hand over to Faye. So if you'd like to kick us off, Faye, and tell us a bit more about yourself, your lockdown experiences and your stay-at-home residency, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, for anyone that doesn't know me, I mean, that was a lovely introduction, so you know me a little bit now anyway. But as Julie said, I'm a socially engaged artist, and I use contemporary art as a catalyst for exploring relationships on the whole. And this is often based on heritage or collections, kind of exploring representation and belonging, and looking at history and kind of institutional stories and the power they have to either, well, empower ourselves or rewrite history and kind of do the opposite of empowering. And so I find ways to collect and share more personal lived experiences to kind of level those stories up slightly. So I shall share my screen. That one, I think. There we go. So this is just a snapshot from my website. Just checking I can still actually move the screen. Yeah, I can. So as you see, quite a varied approach, but quite often using photography or film, but very much responsive to the people I'm working with and the spaces that I'm working in. I often work on site and with specific groups in person. And so lockdown was quite a shock in terms of trying to work in a socially engaged way and suddenly not having access to people in any real sense. A lot of my work was cancelled, but equally a lot of my ideas just didn't work anymore. You know, it was a real moment of rethinking how I approach what I do. The residency I saw advertised for Walsall kind of came about. I had the idea kind of here, this is my kitchen table during lockdown, where it became classroom, play space, place where I was obviously trying to make dinner and keep the house together and all the rest of it. As I was really, as well as obviously dealing with the kind of practical and mental demands of supporting a family without school or childcare, and also just to bracket in, my husband's job became increasingly pressured at the same time. So he was almost effectively out of the picture, which was a bit of a double whammy. And also felt incredibly frustratingly sexist that the default position was that because I'm at home and I'm self-employed, that means I'm mom, you know, and that's my default position, and work can just stop. And the sense of identity I have with my work is obviously really strong. So that was a huge blow, really. And even this lovely space that I work in, my studio at the bottom of the garden, then became my husband's office because he needed the quiet away from the chaos of the house. And so I just felt little by little eroded, I guess. And I was having a bit of a rant on Twitter. Well, not a rant. I was conversing with people on Twitter about, in addition to all that, I felt there was a real pressure to see the specific context of the lockdown and the pandemic situation creatively. There was, I think, unwittingly, various institutions were sort of, I guess Walsall, actually you could be accused of this as well, but they were very early and proactive at least, but were kind of asking artists how they felt and to share their unique experiences and to just be fantastically creative in the moment, which, to be honest, was really hard because we were just drowning like everyone else. Not everyone. I know some people had good lockdown experiences, and of course there were really positive things as well. But anyway, this was the very early stages of the very first strictest lockdown. And it was over those kind of Twitter conversations and these kind of moments at the table that this idea came about, really, that suddenly my children and very many other children were in a moment that they weren't used to experiencing. They were hearing me have conversations with professional conversations. I was trying to work with people in prisons at the time, so all sorts of quite difficult conversations that I wouldn't normally share so openly with them. And they were just suddenly part and parcel of my work and discussing my work's ideas. And it occurred to me that that was quite unique in terms of timing. So what I'll do actually, which will be much more eloquent, is if I read the intro to the book. This collaborative project was devised at my kitchen table during 2020's first and strictest COVID-19 lockdown in the UK. Schools, nurseries and childcare clubs were closed, extended family support cut off, and parents like me were trying to be teachers for homeschooling as well as everything else our workplaces and children needed at such an anxious time. Professional creative life as an artist and the sense of identity that comes with it had to take a back seat and quickly felt extremely precarious. Children found themselves cocooned at the centre of adult life with unprecedented awareness of adult responsibilities, concerns and work pressures. So in this context, with the support of Walsall, I asked children being homeschooled by artist parents to select an artwork by their parent and make something creative inspired by it. That could have been writing or visual, but everyone did something sort of visual or performative. The aim was to empower children to respond to their parents' work, possibly considering it consciously for the first time, and to create a new perspective for the artists and their audiences, challenging parent-child and work-home relationships. The New Art Gallery Walsall supported the project as a stay-at-home residency, and the artists who took part with their children are Mark Titchener, Andrew Tift, Hannah Maybank, Juno Projects, Mahtab Hussain, Joe Gain, myself, and Leah Carless. They are here in reverse alphabetical order because children lower down the alphabet are too often left until last. The resulting paired artworks ask viewers to reassess assumptions around artistic practice and family life. The connections described and illustrated by the children have extraordinary clarity for a time of confusion, crisis, and isolation. I want to thank all the participants for their thoughtful contributions and hope through this publication they can continue to inspire for all the times any parent or child feels the separation of parenting and professionalism, work and home should be challenged. So I will have a quick whiz through with the works that were produced. Everything was produced as just via email because I really didn't want to add to the pressure that people were under. So there were no kind of time appointments involved in this. It was just emails back and forth as and when you can fit. So these are spreads from the book. So Mark Titchener's work, which became quite iconic during the pandemic anyway. So his daughter did a brilliant fingerprint version and signed her name over the top of his, which I think she really enjoyed. And then his son produced one based on another artwork by Mark with a Minecraft theme. And then Andrew Tift's daughter produced a self-portrait based on the self-portrait that he'd produced of her, this image. And then you can see in the book, there's also quotes, a lot of direct quotes from the children as well. So this one, like Samuel, age 5, I'm going to do a huge drawing. And he kind of took over Hannah Maybank's studio for a couple of days, actually. I think he took his time, he milked it quite nicely, and then produced a work that he's declared is better than his mummy's, which is the sort of confidence I was really hoping for. And then Juno Projects, Ben Sadler worked with his daughter, and they produced a couple of quite informal films with this as well, but she decided to make a prop, which became a bag that she could put all her bird teddies and things in as well to take on walks, the walk we were allowed during lockdown. And then Mahtab Hussain spoke to his daughter about his photography series, about going back home to where I came from, which is his journey to Kashmir, which he's never been to. And so they had some really interesting discussions as he produced this beautiful painting, which very much picks up the sort of colours from his photography. And then Joe Gain worked with her son and daughter, originally looking at this kind of bridge artwork which her son did a lovely kind of drawing of from memory, actually. He didn't have the artwork in front of him. And then they kind of went off on a tangent and picked another artwork, which got really exciting and started to incorporate the building work they were having done at the time, using the scaffolding quite performatively. And then my children chose to do something performative, which I was very surprised by, and kind of recreated my quite iconic now bridge artwork using their bodies, which I was not expecting. And they were very keen, they wanted to work together on it. And again, use my studio. They were very keen to take over the studio, which was cool. And then Leah Carlos, who had been working in quite domestic scale clay, smaller than her usual work during lockdown, then got very domestic, including a son who was, at the time, she wasn't sure what connections he was making with her work, apart from the material being clay. But then actually their conversations around play, usually after working with the clay, started to link really clearly with the kind of shape of the train tracks and with the bee toy he was kind of playing with. So it all led to really interesting discussions and resulted in the book, as Julie mentioned, which you can now see alongside the 2020 collection. So that's how I kind of work on this occasion anyway with people. And so it's delightful to be involved tonight in sharing space again with more people. So I'm going to hand over to Yasmin, and please share your experiences.
Hi, thanks, Faye. That was lovely. It was really lovely to get kind of an insight into your life and all of the other pressures that come in. I'm currently working full-time as an artist, which is this has come about since lockdown and since being part of the 2020 collection. Loads of things have snowballed for me. So 2020 was a bittersweet thing, but at the time I was working for a private school as in the marketing department, and I was furloughed at the time. So this pressure that now I had free-ish, because I was now homeschooling as well and a co-parent, to create felt very real. And also I felt just scared, and everything that I was making seemed to reflect that. I'm going to share with you a sketchbook that, of course, I've loaded these videos. I thought I'd taken loads of pictures of it, but it's actually a video. So excuse me whilst I just find it and share my screen with you. Share screen. You'd think after lockdown I'd be really good at Zoom. Share screen. There it is. Lovely. Okay, so this is a sketchbook. It's got some notes in it as well that I kept during the first lockdown. And during this time, I was having massive fear of the blank page. I wasn't able to produce anything that I felt had any real substance. And everything my creative process is very much sort of a drawing as meditation. And just seeing what comes out. And after filling these pages, it became really apparent that I was drawing felt like I was drawing a lot of fear and lots of germs, especially this one that's coming up now. This just felt like what COVID felt like. And I just felt myself drawing lots of dots and things being taken over and crowds, and that sense of fear of when I went into the supermarket and people standing far too close to me for the first time. And as a touchy-feely person, having this very alien feeling of being crowded. So yeah, it wasn't until it's this one here, before it turns, this one was very, felt very real to me at the time, because it was like the monsters kind of creeping in. As for, this is a motherhood and lockdown. my homeschooling, my children knew that I was a fraud. I don't know if anybody else felt that way. They knew that I wasn't a teacher. I was like, we're going to make this really fun. But they could feel my imposter syndrome. And the only way that I could teach them anything was if I did it in an artistic way. So if we were doing times tables, then I would have to, I'd sneak them to get them the answer in daisies, or I would, we would bake, and that would be maths. But as soon as they caught on to me, it was like they weren't interested in anything I had to do. So basically, we spent most of the lockdown making things. I have a video of, I'll carry on playing this for you actually, because it can talk at the same time, do this at the same time. So we would spend a lot of time in the garden with our sketchbooks. My daughter would have hers. This one here, I'm just going to just roll that back because I think excuse my language, but this is a real, I read what I've written. I said, I feel like a shit parent and there's no right or wrong answer. So why do I feel burdened with guilt? Because I'm trying and I feel like I'm losing a battle that doesn't even exist. Because all I'm trying to do is just get through the day, through the anxiety of this pandemic, and try and educate my children, which just seemed like the most important thing to be doing at the time. I think after about 8 weeks, I was like, this is not going to work. We're just going to play. And I'm not sure how anybody else feels, but I don't feel like, they were 3 and 6 at the time, which seems crazy now because that's so little. But I don't feel like the pandemic and being off school has affected them in any way in terms of their education. But I do feel like if that at that point pushing for it would have been detrimental. So yeah, there was lots of, this was a collaborative piece. And then lots and lots of blank pages and bits there. I'm going to show you a piece of work that along the same sort of themes that my son made, which is, where is he? There he is. Okay, I've got it up now. Okay. So we were kind of, if you can see this here, has it come up for you? I'll play the audio because it's quite amusing. So we were all painting up. We had canvases. We were making things all the time, and this kind of like illness and the drawing of what COVID felt in my sketchbook, which came out of nowhere, seemed to rub off on my son. So I'll play this for you.
Sorry, explain to me what the painting is now.
It is you sick on the picture.
So it's vomit.
Yeah, it's sick on here.
That's really, really interesting.
So yeah, that's, oh, there you are, Marnie, put it away there. So yes, that was kind of how, that was how we were rolling through the pandemic. As well, during this time as well, I was commissioned to make a piece of work about Black Lives Matter for the Worcester Arts Workshop, which is where Pardon the Miss came about. One of the, I think everybody, especially people of colour, really struggled through 2020 because we were bombarded with images of trauma and images of the protests and everything that was happening during the time. For my children, it was kind of creating this piece of work at the same time as parenting and explaining to them why I was having heightened anxiety and having to have conversations around race and skin colour for the first time it's not something that we had ever addressed. So it was I think parenting through the pandemic was half trying to keep myself together as a parent, trying to be this kind of forced creativity and trying to find peace, but also trying to explain to my children why I was a nervous wreck and what was happening at the time. And by creating this work in their presence, it developed conversations around their privilege. Both of my children are white, mixed race, but white appearing, because they are, and the kind of privileges and what their responsibility is as a white person to show up for, you know, people in their classrooms who don't look like them, or people that may experience racism, because they were completely unaware of this thing existed. And I think that, I mean, as a parent, we do try and protect our children from these sorts of things, but I realized that in itself, I was instilling a privilege that they already, you know, that they need to be more aware of. Am I making sense? I don't know if I am. Yeah, I'm going to stop there. But that was, yes, that's kind of a little glimpse into what was happening at the time in my home.
Fantastic, thank you, Yasmin. That was really interesting. And just before we move on, I was just going to say the same thing, that, you know, I mentioned in passing about difficult conversations about working with people in prison. The ridiculously unequal statistics of who ends up in prison was something that we ended up talking about quite a lot, I think, because of Black Lives Matter as well. And yeah, I loved your expression of sort of talking about creating in their presence, because there just was no separation of that, was there? And it was quite a special and terrible thing all mixed together.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so continuing the reverse alphabetical order, Sinead, I think you're up next.
Hello, can you hear me? My headphones are being weird before. Is everyone, you hear them? Okay, cool. If anything changes, let me know and I'll whip them out. So I have a slightly different story. I suppose we all have different stories, but before the lockdown, I wouldn't have considered myself an artist. I wouldn't have said I was an artist. I'm an ESOL lecturer. That's my main job. And I was doing that full time and then part time after I had my son. And then I started a photography business. So doing really commercial stuff like newborn babies and maternity and families. And I started that very cleverly in the end of 2019. So it was excellent timing. I also opened a studio in October 2019. Like, this is going to be great. 2020 is going to be my year. I won't need to go back to teaching. I'm going to make loads of money. It's great. Obviously, that never happened. But as hopefully I'll explain clearly, that was probably the best thing that could have happened. So my son was 2 when the lockdown happened. So in some ways, it was probably a lot more challenging than it was for others because he was 2 and his attention span was approximately 1 minute. He also wouldn't sit in front of like a Disney movie. He hadn't got the attention span for that yet either. So even if I'd wanted to, I couldn't have like plopped him in front of the TV. So as a mother, 2020 was probably the most challenging year I've ever had. Just like you were saying, Faye, my husband's job was his full time. So he was working at home, but he was away at 8 till 6 every day of the week. So yeah, I was pretty much on my own unless it was a proper emergency. I didn't feel like I could go and interrupt. My teaching job were amazing. Interestingly, it's an organisation mainly run by women and mothers. They were very chill. They were just like, you know what, teach your classes, do half as much as you need, we'll still pay you the same. It was fine. So I was trying to teach my classes and have my son in the background. But because I only worked part-time, I had this other time during the week. So obviously I was normally filling that time with going out, going to soft play, going to play dates, going swimming, visiting my mum, all that stuff. So that all had to stop. And I remember being absolutely terrified. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. I didn't know how I was going to parent him, because I hadn't really got to grips with parenting him just me in the house. We'd always have a plan and go out, go for a walk or something. So yes, as a mother, it was an extremely challenging year. But as a photographer, it was probably the best year, which I'll try and explain. So I started this business, and as some of you might also be, when I get an idea, I sort of like focus on it and just go completely all in, 100 miles an hour. I don't stop. There's no half. It's always just like I'm going 100 miles an hour with a project, or I just don't do it. So my head was 100% focused on like having a studio. I was going to do this kind of photography. And if I share my screen, I'm going to show you the kind of work I was doing before the pandemic, and then hopefully I can show you how it changed throughout. So I had a studio at the bottom of the garden. It wasn't really a studio, it was just my garage, and I converted it pretty much myself. It was, the building was fine, but I turned it into this studio, and it was a white room. And the kind of work I was doing, hopefully you can see that, was like little babies. Everyone was wearing white, and I was kind of modeling my work on other photographers who did the same thing around the country. There's a few people doing the same kind of thing. So this was where I was doing kind of like very traditional, bring your children and I will photograph them and make them look really cute. The problem was I hadn't really considered how much work it was going to be to run a studio by myself with another job and a 2-year-old who at the time wasn't even 2 yet when I opened it. So I found myself by February 2020 sort of burning out, like really burning out, because I was trying to maintain this bright, airy, white studio for photography, but the space itself was basically a dungeon. Like it was a garage, the bottom of the garden. It was damp, it was dark, and I was sort of cleaning it all the time, repainting it all the time. It was getting moldy, and I was having to just stay on top of it all. So when I had to close it, I was kind of like, oh, okay, phew, I can stop doing that. Actually, like my brain wouldn't let me stop, but the pandemic forced it. So obviously I was still trying to improve as a photographer. I still wanted to take photographs. So I channeled that elsewhere. So I was part of a photography group that was for women and marginalized genders, and they were organizing a in-person conference that got cancelled. It was supposed to happen on like the 20th of March 2020. So we were all in this group together, ready to go to this conference in Manchester. And then inadvertently, that group turned into like a support network for female photographers. And we were sort of setting each other projects and doing training online, a bit like this. So my personal photography just turned into this completely new thing, because I wasn't trying to please clients anymore. I wasn't trying to make money, wasn't trying to sell prints, upsell. It was literally just me. And I was shooting for myself for the first time ever. I didn't have an audience, it was just me. So some of the work that I created was documenting my own family, because I thought, well, what else can we do? Like I might as well just set up a tripod. That's an activity. That'll kill a few minutes. I also really felt like I needed to document the time, like document the weird stuff that was going on, you know, like the numbers on the street and like the shops all being closed. So I felt like I needed to document that. And then also I wanted to just have a bit of fun, just like document stuff and just take pictures of stuff that I found really pretty. So some of the work that I did, I think I can show it if I've got them open on my computer, but I'll just share them now. So some of the work that I did just for me, oh, here we go. So this obviously is the image. So if I close these, the one that I think you can see is the one that was the title image for this event, which is the one of my son and me in the garden. So this image is kind of typical of just having a day and you're like, I'm really bored, I'm going to set up the camera. And this is what happened in those few minutes. Another image, so like I said, trying to document what was going on my street. So things like the grills being down on shops, that was really unusual. 2 meters, you can kind of just see in there, because I mean, how weird, like that's never going to happen again. Like, I don't know, maybe it never happened before. It's just like an odd thing to see. And then things kind of got a bit weird. So I was taking self-portraits. So one of the other things I was experimenting with was portraits of myself, different camera settings, like blur, just going completely mad because I wasn't trying to sell a picture to someone of their baby. I was just seeing what I could do as an artist for the first time, as opposed to a photographer. And I know those things can be the same thing, but I definitely wasn't an artist photographer before this. I think the last thing, yes. So I had another Instagram feed, and I was just wanted to show you the difference from pre-lockdown. So I was taking like nice pictures, you know, like fine, there's nothing wrong with any of these, just decent pictures of my kid, my garden, some ducks, like nice. But then you can see, hopefully you can see, I can see the stark difference. So this was all pre-pandemic, this was all 2019. I was just following my son around. And then when 2020 kicks off, there's like an explosion of color. So hopefully you can see now, this is now March 2020, the difference in my work. When I was just shooting for myself, I went full floral. I put a lot of color into my work, self-portraits, flowers, like everything was just completely different. And I don't really know how to explain it. Like, no, I don't know what happened other than the lockdown and just having time, and my photography practice being just for me again, not for other people. So yeah, so I've come out of it an artist. Like I would say, you know, I've got 2 jobs. One is being a teacher and the other one is being an artist. And I would say that lockdown was the catalyst for that. And I haven't gone back to doing the same client work. I never reopened my studio. We've moved house, so I don't have it anymore. And I don't miss it at all. And now it always exclusively produce weird art and self-portraits. And then the people that know me book me for family photography that's just in their own homes. It's very chilled, it's very relaxed. So yeah, I think that's kind of the interesting journey that lockdown took me on. I don't think I'd do it again, but it's hard to deny from a creative point of view that it was just like a sort of completely life-changing experience for me as a photographer. As a mother, I'm quite happy now, actually, thank you. Not being in lockdown. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Sinead. God, that is so interesting. Really interesting that it was just at that moment in your life where you're about to launch in one direction, and yeah, if we can call it that, completely took you another way. It's really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up, Sally. You were having a very different time all of a sudden as lockdown started.
Yes. Hello. Great. Can you guys see me? Yeah. Good. Okay. Cool. So yes, lockdown for me was it's a bit like Julie's. So I had a brand new baby who was born 3 days before lockdown. which was basically drove most of my experience for the whole of that. So yeah, just to introduce myself. So I'm an artist, lecturer and researcher based in Birmingham. And my practice is always engaged with female subjectivity and is always looked at ideas of the body and identity and things like that through a female kind of feminist perspective. And I think it's always taken this quite semi-autobiographical journey. So it sort of naturally now is about elements of the maternal and ideas of fertility. But yeah, as I said, my lockdown experience was totally driven by the fact that I'd had a brand new baby. Luckily, it was my second, which I'm quite grateful for, because people who had their first baby at the beginning of lockdown, you know, that's an experience I would not want to have, really. But yeah, I managed to make some artwork as well, which I was quite lucky, I think, because my husband was at home and he was furloughed. And so luckily he was on hand. But that, although looking back, that was fantastic. But at the time, it obviously felt fairly intense having just the four of us there the whole time. And there were moments, I'm sure, when I just thought, I just want to go see my mum. She lives around the corner. I just want to go and see her. And obviously we weren't allowed to. And so the grandparents all got to hold my daughter once, and then it was, you know, waving through the window and all that, which was quite a horrible time. But the artwork I produced, I think was quite fruitful. So I was just going to show some, let me just show, yeah, some of the work I produced. Can you guys see that? Yeah, cool. Okay, so this is the piece that I produced for the Walsall 2020 collection that's in the gallery at the moment. And this is called Lockdown Hair, Who Cares? So this is about kind of those increased caring responsibilities that were assumed by women, especially mothers, during the pandemic. And as I said, it drew on my own experience as a new mother of two during this time, the one born 3 days before lockdown, and kind of all those extra care burdens that were assumed by the wider mothering community. And this is a triptych. This is the part one of the triptych. And these are mobile phone snaps of myself and my children. So there's my daughter on the left there, 3 days old. So it's the first day of lockdown, my son on the right there, and myself in the middle. And it uses the idea of hair as a metaphor for kind of these wearing and caring rituals. So it's a kind of nod to the triviality of like lockdown hair, because most people had lockdown hair because obviously hairdressers were closed, but it's paralleled with these various caring idioms, which I've kind of put there in hashtags, so some of those were banded around at the time, but some of them are quite personal to me as well. And the whole series kind of reflects the changing messages about how to protect ourselves and others during those 3 UK lockdowns. And it was about, for me, some of those new normalities of everyday life whilst isolated with 2 small children. So this is lockdown 1, be careful. This is lockdown 2, take care. So this is when we'd started to have childcare bubbles. My son is talking about kind of, not getting too close. Here's when I tried to cut my son's hair, so hence why it looks a little bit strange in that photo. And myself thinking about whether I need to get myself looking better, but what was the point, because no one's going to see me anyway. And then the third one is about self-care. So it's reflecting on my daughter, the fact that she's still under my care, that the nurseries still aren't open, that my son is being homeschooled, and it's sort of reflection on that screen time, mental health care, and then myself and kind of the ideas about it starting to wear really and carrying all those kind of cares on myself. So it's those 3 things, as I said, across that. So everything from, social distancing to with family and friends, to bubbles, to school teaching, like school learning. And it reflects on those prolonged pressures on mothers, which I think, is quite immense. It wasn't perhaps the worst experience at all, but it was quite an immense pressure. And it was about those ideas of taking care and how that kind of sentiment, never meant so much as it did during this time. And then another piece I did, this is called Easy Does It. So this is about the easy method for when you have babies. which I think is meant to be kind of a more relaxed approach, but any kind of method can feel like a proper schedule about where you're trying to put your baby into certain sort of ways of regulating them in the hope that probably that you get a full night's sleep, really, and trying to get those good sleep patterns, and also maybe carve out some space for you, which is kind of hard to maintain at the best of times, but during a pandemic, it's pretty impossible. So, you know, when your village is gone, because that's what it felt like for me, the village had gone, I had another child around who was constantly present and required looking after. Jobs are obviously being run from home, domestic duties are massively increased, and time was generally twisted. And so any routine felt like, you know, it inevitably was tested. Any newborn at the beginning of the pandemic like mine saw their first year kind of borne out across those 3 lockdowns. And I think it felt like it was a time that was often sort of endured by mothers. Yes, there were moments of beauty and happiness and loveliness, but the whole thing felt like a bit of an endurance. So it was a time when, playing on these words, it was like when everybody needed to eat, activities had to be provided for everyone, and baby sleep on the whole was a time when you basically cleared it all up and started all over again. So this idea about you having space for you just kind of completely disappeared altogether. And this is made with blood, sweat and tears, literally. So this was a phrase that was synonymous with Winston Churchill's speech in 1940 when he warned the British people of the hardships to come in fighting World War II. So I'm not trying to say the pandemic was anywhere near a world war at all. However, it was a time of kind of adversity for many people, and I think especially for mothers, and it was kind of only just kind of coming out now and coming out when I made this about how heavy it actually was. And then the last piece I was going to show you was this one. So these are 3 quotes that are taken from Family Circle magazine in 1972, where they were praising women for their potentially more natural caretaking role in the home, which obviously is an identity ascribed by patriarchy that I felt was, well, and certain stats showed it was certainly reimposed on many mothers 50 years later during the pandemic. And these pieces are produced on kitchen roll, which of course is a material that is like repetitively used to mop up messes. It's readily discarded. And the nature of this is representative of those increased housework that mothers have absorbed into their new daily lives. And it's so easily dismissed by others as trivial and unimportant. And the use of the children's letters is kind of a nod to the homeschooling activities that were going on, and the cleanliness of the kitchen roll, which leaves the words quite hard to see, speaks to the invisibility of many of those aspects of maternal labour. And it's kind of imprinted with a real sense of fragility, which is meant to be reminiscent of those that were overwhelmed by those unprecedented extra activities and extra burdens that were put on them. But this one does have a positive message. So by kind of framing them and representing them, I wanted to take the sentiments of those quotes and kind of reappropriate them at the time to celebrate the resourcefulness of any mother artists who were still creating during the pandemic. So like lots of other mothers who were simultaneously struggling on with their professional lives, or who had been forced to partially rescind or fully rescind those for caring activities, mother artists were, I think, continually balancing homemaking and art making and making do. And this was a kind of salute to those who were creating in any way they could, in any time they could, and using kind of what was at their disposal. Often producing art from like the disorder and the domestic detritus that was part of their current daily lives. So it was a kind of well done to all the mums who carry on making good work, whatever that work may be, and basically making everything better, basically. So yeah, that was my little run of work that I did during the pandemic. And they were all variously submitted to different things, because luckily there were lots of mother artist organisations that I belonged to that did call outs, probably just after the pandemic. I can't quite again, you know, work out when the timings were or anything now, because we've all lost a chunk of our lives. But it was that kind of those spaces that I had to release this work, really, and I felt that was really needed. I think more needed than I thought it was. And they all just kind of came flooding out of me, really. So yeah, those were 3 series I did. Shall I pass on to, hold on, let me stop screen sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. I was just going to take a moment to say welcome to a few people that have joined us as well, who might be wondering what's going on. But we're all just taking sort of 5 to 10 minutes to introduce everyone that's on the panel. And we've been doing it in reverse alphabetical order as a sort of an attempt to rebalance some of the norms of the world. So next is Adele, if you're happy to take over. And we are asking people, you can pop any comments or questions in the chat, and we'll also open it up and have a discussion at the end after Adele's spoken. So hold your thoughts, we do want to hear them. Oh, the timing's good. It looks like Adele's child has just come to join her at the moment.
I'm really sorry, actually. It's probably the worst timing ever, but my daughter needs me for a minute. So
that's fine.
If you want to have some discussion, I'll be back in hopefully 5 minutes or sooner. Sorry.
No need to apologise at all. There we go. Adele is proving that's what this is all about, is balancing. So have we got any comments in the chat as yet? Has everybody's been quiet and shy? I can jump in with something if we've got. I will keep talking until anyone else interrupts me, put it that way. Feel free to interrupt. But
I can ask you a question if you like, Faye.
Crikey, okay. I was just deflecting then.
You want to fill the space? No, I was just interested. I was on maternity leave, obviously, when you did your residency, so I was a bit less aware of the ins and outs. But I was just it's a bit of a banal question, but it'll fill some space some time. How did you pick the artists? What was the criteria? Was it just like artist friends that you knew? Were there people that was said no way? Like, how did you kind of get the group together? And it's interesting that it's not solely mothers, but it's fathers and carers, you know, as well. So I just was wondering, yeah, how did that group come together?
It's an interesting one, because I didn't want to do it as an open call, because it was meant to be fairly lightweight in terms of my time as well as everyone else's involved. And so I kind of started it with the discussion with the New Art Gallery Walsall, actually, because part of what I was interested in was whatever our children made about our work would be a new way of people that maybe knew our work already to see us very differently. So I was kind of seeing it almost like these young people will become new critics of our work, and that any audiences that know our work would actually find that more interesting than somebody coming cold. So I was basically talking to Walsall about who they'd shown in the past, who they'd got working relationships with, who they knew had got children in the kind of age bracket.
Yeah, because I was going to say majority of them are collections artists, which is a fantastic document for us.
Yeah, so there's a few that I knew personally anyway, which obviously made approaching easier, especially because, you know, it was quite early in the lockdown, so really difficult time to get in touch with people and go, hi, you know, I know you've got a lot on or nothing on. I don't know how your headspace is. It was really hard to kind of compassionately frame those kind of approaches when you genuinely don't know what mental state people were in. But I think all but one person that I approached took part, and interestingly, that person that turned it down was dealing with a lot of Black Lives Matter. She's a Black artist and was dealing with a lot. So there was another interesting context to that.
Yeah, but, yeah, and they were quite interested. I like the fact that you're saying, like, through seeing the artists differently through their children's eyes and seeing their works differently. Did you have a bit of a club then? Were you all able to kind of moan together about your experiences as artists during lockdown?
We didn't really. I mean, Yeah, I didn't ever bring us together as one group. I kind of intended to, and then realised that in itself was a pressure. And so I kind of left it open that people could get in touch with, but we never had one big group call or anything, which later in the pandemic I started doing with others, and it was really nice. But in those early days, it was still, it just wasn't the headspace for that kind of, oh, let's all have a new relationship and present a new version of ourselves to people. It was all just a bit too raw still.
Oh, interesting. But it's great to have that artist book as the outcome. But yeah, I don't know how you managed to take on that as a new piece of work at the same time as doing Wee Bear and everything else. So I'm amazed at how productive and all this work that you were able to produce, everyone, during lockdown. Adele, are you okay to rejoin us, or do you need a bit more time? Or
yeah, I'll be fine now.
You want to go now? While you can, we'll show. So maybe back to you then.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks Julie for organising this, and lovely to hear from everybody. And I love, the really broad range of styles and practices. It's a pleasure to hear from everyone. I'm a single parent, which is why I don't have help right now. I co-parent with my ex, but didn't fall on a night with childcare, so hopefully I can still concentrate and deliver this. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see this slide? Yeah, okay. So yeah, the work in I have in the 2020 collection is a series of instant photographs, as Julie mentioned at the start. And this kind of started with, I guess, right at the beginning of the first lockdown, when we were a group of us friends were due to go on holiday, and it was, the worst timing in the world. Basically, it was like that weekend when it started. So this sort of first kind of little series of instant photos was called Cancelled Holiday, and trying to, kind of just basically go outside and have a nice time instead. So this is my daughter, who was she was 2.5, and so this is kind of like the origins of the Instant Dreamscapes in Isolation series, because I was exploring instant photography, because I quickly realized that the film lab that I use really, really regularly, because I shoot a lot of 35mm analog film, was closed down, which was totally disorientating and devastating for me, because it's my whole kind of passion is using that medium. So anyway, I started using a different type of film that was obviously something I could process at home and have an immediate kind of result with. Now I just have to move the slide. How do I do that? Oh, okay. So one of the things we did say was go out to the common and scatter some seeds. Because it was trying to cheer us up. We started, taking long walks around the city. I noticed this was one of the places, I guess, lots of families in Coventry, where we're based, would go to. Is a really, really huge, lovely park called Memorial Park, where it ended up being just the kind of substitute for all of our usual social things, the baby group, the nursery, the pub. You would just often go there and see most of your friends, because it was the place to go. So my daughter was really drawn to standing in the middle of this contained circle, which I found really interesting. So I was we were in a way it was this kind of freedom, a sense of freedom we had to just explore, which was quite nice. Luckily her nursery was only closed for about 3 or 4 months. So that was wasn't really disruptive for us. And then this was the first image I took from these walks that ended up being in the series that's at Walsall, which is so it's a series of 32, I think I've probably got that wrong now, instant photos. And but then I also so it became, so again, like exploring instant film a lot. So then it became through a call out for a small bit of funding from two local organisations, the Pod, who work with sort of enduring mental health sort of people in crisis, and the TIN, which is a local music and arts charity. They have a kind of a partnership called a dialogue partnership, and they fund artists to kind of create dialogue and conversations. So myself and a few other artists in the city, one being Sherry Edgar, who's also in the 2020 show, had one of these commissions, which was a real boost actually, because sort of gave me a bit of a focus at the time, and I found a kind of way to bring these instant photos together and to formulate it into something which was such a great excuse to focus on something and have a project to work towards. And so it basically consisted of me and my partner at the time taking it in turns to go on bike rides to get out of the house. So each day we'd basically have an hour each to go for a bike ride, which worked well for quite a while. And so the film, when I pulled it together, was a really therapeutic and enjoyable experience. And the audio felt like a really creative process, because I felt I remembered I had a piece of footage of my granddad playing the piano in the early 90s, and from an old video camera footage. So I extracted the audio, and he was playing the Vera Lynn song We'll Meet Again, which kind of became a bit of an iconic song in the lockdown. So I used that as a kind of bedding for the audio, which was lovely. And then there was, as Julie said, my daughter came on one of the bike rides, and there's dialogue from her, which is very sweet because she was only 2, sort of jabbering. And then there was field recordings from going cycling around the suburbs of Coventry, and kind of people's radios or cars, or so there's also, I think there's a bit sound of the bicycle wheels and things like that. So I kind of really enjoyed that process of collaging the audio together and creating this kind of mood, which as the sort of title suggests, the dreamscapes idea was really just about how it felt cycling around these really empty streets, just totally surreal and uncanny, and weird Lynchian film or something. And then there was I think a grain bursary call out at the sort of soon after that, which I applied for, basically about having a 2-year-old at home in lockdown, etc., which I didn't get. But then I sort of got thinking about failed open calls and failed commissions, and that as a series in itself. So a series of failed kind of applications in a way. So but it was, I borrowed a medium format camera off a friend, which was good practice for me. So these when I think of motherhood and lockdown, these are the images I think of, and just kind of bumming around the house a lot, really. And then and this is also around the time me and my daughter's dad separated, so that was kind of in a way took over the lockdown, and became quite just a very all-encompassing, intense experience. I can't really describe it right now. So these are images, I guess, of those first few kind of weeks where everything changed, really. Kate's having a look. Seeing herself on the screen. So we spent these sort of quiet days together in the garden, and it's really memorable moments. I think that's the end, actually. I was going to mention, of course, doing Mothers Who Make Hub in Coventry. So that also took up a lot of my focus, because sort of the Mothers Who Make HQ based in London and Exeter, they really yeah, they had a lot of motivation and commitment and drive to keep the movements going during this like really tough time for mothers. And so I ended up at one point doing like every 2 weeks we had meetings and with peer support discussion where we all, you know, shared our experiences. And some of the meetings was really busy and, you know, hopefully really helpful for everybody. And I was just going to mention one other project that I forgot to put in the slides, which was a commission I had sort of a bit later on in the lockdown about new allotment holders. That yes, people that started allotment during the pandemic. So that was through the pod as well, who commissioned the Instant Dreamscapes film. And so yeah, that was really nice because obviously we were just about allowed to do that. You know, we visited people's allotment plots and so we were outside and keeping a distance. And so I interviewed them about how they ended up with, you know, what inspired them with, you know, to take on an allotment, and how it was, you know, to do with a lack of green spaces they had if they had flats, and you know, looking after their mental health, and you know, and taking their children there as well. So yeah, that's a series that I've collated on a website, which and then we've been funded to revisit the plots. So we visited 3 times over the course of a year. So yeah, I think that's probably about it for now. Thank you. Oh, I stopped sharing, don't I?
Oh, thanks, Adele. Oh, thanks everyone for sharing these fantastic insights into what you were all up to during lockdown. And I just want to open it out now to the floor. I don't know if people are happy, you can put your cameras on and unmute and ask questions, or just unmute and ask questions, or just pop them in the chat box. But I don't know if anyone or any of the artists themselves have any thing to add, or any questions for any of the other artists.
I actually had a question that I wrote down that I was really interested to ask. So obviously the main point of what I was saying is how the lockdown changed my making, my photography, pretty much for good. And I wanted to put it out there to anybody really, but also the artists, if there was anything that changed for good during or because of the lockdown, either as a parent, as a mother, or as an artist, with something in your practice that you had to change and then you kept that change, or as a parent you had to adapt and actually work better that way. So yeah, that was what I was interested to know. Anybody?
I've got 2 very quick examples. One parenting, one art, I suppose. Not that I'm trying to keep those separate anymore. But yeah, in terms of homeschooling, I think my eldest was in his final year of primary, which he didn't really do. He didn't really have a final year, obviously. And having an insight into both how they learned, but particularly him before he went to secondary school, was amazing, actually. And I'll always be grateful for that. But it was incredibly difficult on a very practical level, trying to be teacher when, you know, I haven't really got a clue. But yeah, to have that learning time together and to really get inside their heads a bit. Oh, there's one of them now. Just appeared on the path doing that at me. But yeah, so that was a real positive. And then in terms of practical things with my work, I think Julie mentioned the We Bear project, which was working with people in prisons, and I was meant to be starting that in person, going into prisons, and of course prisons were even more locked down and for longer than everywhere else. And so I had to make a new partnership and find ways to work remotely with people that were kind of embedded within prisons. And that meant that instead of working with potentially one prison here and one in America, I ended up working with 25 different prisons on that project because I could do it remotely and had to do it remotely. And that's now a model that I'm hoping to expand funding and support and all the rest of it happening. But I'm hoping that means there's no real limit globally. That was like American prisons and UK prisons. I'm hoping to add in other countries, and we'll do it again and do it bigger. And I would never have thought of any of that. I would have just gone in and done workshops face to face, and it would have been a great experience for everyone involved, but it would have stayed at that kind of very small level. So yeah, a bit like you, an idea kind of had to explode. And so yeah, that was good. But because of partnerships, it forced me not to work on my own. Right. Anyone else?
I was going to say, actually, it was because of the lockdown and changes in, you know, the whole of society, really, that I even became a freelance artist. That was when I first registered self-employed, and luckily I'm still keeping it up. I don't know how long for. But yeah, it completely changed everything, like, for the better for me. So I was working as a barista, you know, completely uninspiring and unrelated to my interests, and that obviously just cut out straight away, and things became quite interesting for me, weirdly. Yeah.
For me, in a similar way, where I was working in marketing at a school and making art for joyfully on the side. Something I didn't mention before was that my first solo exhibition since finishing uni, which was 12 years before, was in March 2020. So it was the longest running exhibition at the Worcester Arts Workshop that no one saw. But from there, then, you know, I got the commission to create Pardon the Miss, and I also mentored Worcester Uni students because they wanted to make a body of work about what they'd learned through Black Lives Matter. Now, if I was asked to go into a uni and mentor students at that point, it would have been, nah, you're all right, I can't deal with it, social anxiety, teenagers. It wouldn't have happened. But the fact that we were doing it over Zoom meant that there was this distance between me and the students I was working with. And we were all, you know, we just had our faces, and we were just felt much, so, you know, we were much less vulnerable. And I think if it wasn't for that experience, I wouldn't have applied for the job at the New Art Gallery. And I wouldn't, and this has basically spiraled a career where I'm now working full-time as an artist. So there's little pockets of being able, you know, speaking at a Black Lives Matter protest, doing the, like, needing to get things off my chest, then mentoring, and finding my physical voice has helped me kind of snowball a career out of this. Whereas before I was like a struggling artist with hustling all the time, you know, if I could pick up a little bit of work here and there, but the hustle, the side hustles disappeared, and now the art hustle is the constant. Yeah, I think the only thing now is that I'm needing to kind of like just remember to take a break, because I think as well, pandemic, because we were like, well, where's our money going to come from? What are we going to do? Am I going to have my job back after furlough? What's happening? I have this kind of like constant make hay whilst the sunshine thing right now, and I don't want to say no to anything because we don't know when it's all going to go wrong again. And I don't know if anybody else is kind of like feeling that as well. That's how it's been since. Supremely grateful, very tired, but supremely grateful as well.
Yeah, I agree with you about not knowing where like the next thing is going to come from. Something I didn't mention is that because of the lockdown, it was wonderful to be doing this work just for me, but I was working super part-time as a teacher, and I had a permanent contract with the council. So I actually doubled my hours this past year, and it felt like end of 2019 me would have been like, what are you doing? You're going to be a photographer, it's going to be great. But the idea that I could have more permanent work was a massive factor. Like the pandemic being like, could there be another one? Are we going to have another lockdown? I took on more permanent work, which means I've had less time for the actual art that improved over the lockdown. I'm doing less of it. The quality is better, but yeah, I had to make that choice. And it's for those exact reasons, like make hay while the sun shines. Like, they're offering me these hours, it's going to take away all my time to create, but I've got a permanent job, like I can't turn that down.
Yeah.
So yeah, big change.
I've found over the last 2 years that I've been making more work with other people than I have personal work, which I think again is a symptom of being alone for 18 months, being locked inside. It's like this real willingness to like reach out and create with other people. But I also do feel like I have this huge craving to kind of like just express myself in a way that is really personal. Like I've got a bunch of stuff that I need to creatively spew out, and to provide myself with that space again. Needing to, even now, like post lockdown, it's like now I'm reminding myself to carve that time out for myself. I think that's motherhood as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I keep saying it's because I do engagement work, and that a lot of institutions and others, I think, have realised because of the pandemic, obviously, audience numbers are low and engagement is low. People are being very choosy with what they do with their time now, on the whole. And so I have never been busier, because people are realising the value of having somebody that can connect in a really meaningful way with audiences, even if they're smaller audiences. I think the sense of it being meaningful is suddenly there as something quite urgent, which is wonderful, and exactly what I've been banging on about for a decade or so. But I totally get your make hay while the sun shines mentality, because God, it's been a crazy year. I have not stopped. I'm working weekends and evenings, and like you say, it's all with a sense of huge gratitude, because there was really a point in the pandemic where I thought it wasn't going to come back, that things were getting cut so much, and art was not being defended as something that was essential in a world where we only needed the essentials. And I thought, this is it. My career is over. We're all going to be baristas, but yeah, the opposite has happened. But like you say, I can't trust that that's the new normal. I mean, even that phrase didn't exist, did it, before? But yeah, so I'm having a crazy busy year, thinking, what will next year bring? Something highly different, maybe. So yeah, and it helps that my kids are the age they are. They're getting way more independent now, which, to those of you with smaller kids, God, it does happen, and it's wonderful. they get their independence, and it's just wonderful. Cool. Yeah, go on, Adele.
Sorry, I wish I'd heard what you just said then, but I got the very end. And you reminded me actually of a friend the other day who saw this event happening and said it looked really interesting. She is a mum of two teenage, sort of young adult boys. I think, yeah, they don't live at home anymore. I think one, in their early 20s, and so she just mentioned how I guess she wondered if that would be brought into the conversation, perhaps that experience of throughout the pandemic having children but them not actually being near you, and not living in the same city as you, and not being able to see them, and that worry there. So I just thought I would bring that in, really. Obviously I don't have experience of that myself.
That's interesting, and because that really speaks to Christina's work in the 2020 collection, Christina Celestini, and I think we opened it to all the artists who wanted to be involved, but she would have been an interesting person from that perspective. So she has adult children, and she really struggled without seeing them during the pandemic, and she was shielding as well. And she moved her studio to home, and then they'd left items of clothing around the house, in their old bedrooms and things. And what she did during lockdown was she was used to drawing portraits of her children and things, but she'd started drawing their clothes, and she called the series Memories That You Left Behind. And that was her way of being close to them when they couldn't physically be together. So yeah, that's like a different experience of motherhood and art during lockdown. So yeah, her work's interesting from that perspective. Is there anyone else that has any questions in the last few minutes?
I don't think I've got a question. I think it was more sorry. I think it was more that it become my phone might die. Just I've had to quickly nip on my phone because the kids are pandemonium still. They've only just come up from the garden. So I just thought I could. So it's lovely to hear all, and I love seeing the work. But what I found in lockdown is that you know, the people that sort of said that art wasn't, some people you speak to, they're not, even my own husband, you know, it's not needed, or it doesn't say it's not needed, but it's quite dismissive of it. And I just think art was the only thing during lockdown that was real, like quite real, that you could do, and everybody would just sort of flow with it. So it become vital in our house that we had to create, and I think that's what stayed with me. That's what I've got from it, that I was always I needed art all the time anyway, but how it could be used within the household for lots of different things. So that's what I liked about, not that I liked it about lockdown, about being stuck in, but I was definitely much more in the moment, and I think I've tried to make life a bit more simpler because of lockdown and because of art during lockdown. So yeah, there's that. I don't know whether that's relevant or...
Oh yeah, no, that's definitely relevant. And even for me, like being at home with my kids during lockdown and being creative with them, that was what like got us through. And I actually appreciated that time to spend, like you didn't have to be anywhere, you didn't have to rush, you didn't have to go anywhere, and making stuff with them. And I've kind of become more creative as a result as well. And my walls are covered in their pictures, our kitchen was our hub as well, like Faye's was. So that's really good. And I totally can relate to that. Can you guys?
I did do some lockdown pictures. I went down and did the doorstep photos for everyone because I was just itching to get out there with the camera.
Yeah, that was a good way of connecting with people, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was nice. But my favourite ones were just in the house with us. So that was nice.
And also I think it kept us all sane, didn't it? And for well-being, it shows the importance of art for well-being.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thanks for that. Does anyone else have any final thoughts?
Just wanted to say that same as the other artists, really. Although lockdown was hard as a mother, I think it was actually fantastic as an artist. I think same as the others, my career kind of just exploded, and now I'm going to make a full-time go of it, which is really exciting. I think it made us more determined. It made us want to say something because we all had something to say. I think what somebody was saying about the international connections was absolutely amazing, and the fact that, again, I work collaboratively, somebody mentioned that, and I think that's fantastic. And that I think that also there's been a real emphasis back on motherhood and back on the maternal, and I think people are interested. I don't know if it's just the networks that I'm involved in, but for me it's been really exciting that there is an academic interest, an artist interest in it, and it, just like art itself, it's having a resurgence, and people are interested in hearing what these people have to say. It's becoming worthy, which is for me really exciting. So I think it's both the art and the motherhood is kind of being lifted by the pandemic because it's been neglected, because we realized that those people, those areas, art and mothering, parenting, maybe held us all up. So it's like people want to, we've got a lot to say about it still. And
the importance of artists and art to kind of document these times and translate these feelings and emotions that we've all been having and kind of that we've all lived through collectively. And it's brilliant. It's been brilliant to hear that you've all kind of had such creative freedom during lockdown and have all really blossomed as artists over it, which is like amazing. And there's definitely, we covered both the challenges, but then there was positives as well that came out of it. So it was really fascinating. So thanks so much, guys, for sharing all that with us. I'm conscious that we're after 9 o'clock and my kids still aren't in bed. But thank you so much for joining us this evening. And as I said earlier, it has been recorded, so we will kind of edit it a bit together and share that with everyone that signed up that couldn't make it, and try to put it on the gallery's YouTube channel as well. But yeah, thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Lovely to meet you all.
Very nice
Thanks,
to meet you.
everyone.
Have a good rest of evening.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.